Okay, call the meeting to order. It is 5:16 according to the clock on the wall. This is meeting of the Recode Rowlett stakeholders meeting. Today's date is the 10th day of June 2025. And first of all, I'd like to recognize in the audience here, new council member John Bowers is with us this evening.
Thank you.
And the newest addition to our city council. Did everybody receive the email, the minutes this afternoon? Did you have a chance to read them? Okay. Any additions or changes or anything to the minutes as they were printed? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to adopt the minutes of the May 27, 2025 meeting.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes as presented from the May 27, 2025 meeting.
There's a second, Ms. Williams and Ms. McKee. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Before we go into the presentation by Christoph this evening, there's a couple of things that I want to throw out and take a moment to advise as we look in, especially tonight's meeting, and we start really diving into density and the standards of zoning for residential and multifamily. I want to draw your attention to some things. 1 acre of land, just in case you don't know, is 43,560 square feet. And I've always been told by developers through the years, if you're going to develop a piece of property, take out about 20%. That will apply to the, and it may be more than that in some things, but typically about 20% for the infrastructure, your roads, your right of ways, for your utilities and stuff like that. And 20% of 1 acre would be about 8,712 square feet. So keep that in mind when you think about the number of houses or units or whatever per acre when we talk about that, because we're going to start with talking about units per acre. Some of the other things that I think that we need to take into account when we look at this, our population currently, somebody help me with that, 68,000, something like that. Is that about right? And as I was talking to the mayor Saturday, and we were talking, and I made a comment back in '95 when I came on P&Z, the zoning in this city at that time would have allowed up to about 102,000, a little over 102,000 population. If we're at 68, and if we go to a density that allows something like that, I think you have to keep in mind, what are we talking about the potential population for the density that we look at? What kind of road structure and gridlock are we going to have? And this town is virtually by itself in the way that we're limited in roads because of the lake and the fingers of the lake that divide us. And so I think you have to keep that in mind. And also, when I'm looking through this, and I'll probably make some more comments, when you look at the widths of the lots and depths and so forth, setbacks, how many one-story homes are we going to be able to build? Or are they ought to be 2- and 3-story homes to get what people want? So from that standpoint, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Bauer, Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, sir. So just, this is, I always start off with this, what our sort of goal here is. This is kind of, this, when we brought this to you, this slides will show you, because you have the information in front of you. This is just the definitional piece. And then what we've done is we've went out and tried to find areas of the community that would translate. So this is an area, Chandler Park number 4. You look at the R1 zone. We can zone this R1, and it would be conform. I think the one thing that you talk about, and we talk about this several times, is that the vast majority of our community is already built. So as we put these new zoning places in place, we're trying to not create non-conformity. So have we created zones that allow us to take the existing zoning, existing development, put it into those zones, and not create any non-conformity? So this one is R1.
Can you orient us? I don't know where Chandler Park is, sorry.
This is Hickok Road. Help me out, guys. Where is this at? You guys can tell about that.
Alright, well, I'd have to go back and look.
That's Taylor.
It's Taylor and Hickox, I think, over there. Mm-hmm.
Is that Hickok Area?
I believe that's one Hickox.
Blue Bonnet.
What's the building? What's the structure there? Is it a school?
No,
I bet it's a church.
oh,
Because then there's no playground.
Oh, is that the Sacred Heart Church? What do you got?
All right, now I can put in my own presentations.
Isn't it Rowlett?
Yes, this is Taylor and Hickox. I can tell you the closest. So it's east of Rowlett Road, not far off, and that building there is Back Elementary School.
Thank you.
Oh, it is in high school. I was wrong.
Yep, and that one's a clean one. We just wanted to kind of show you the outline so you can see the subdivision.
Right. So here's the subdivision here. So this R1 zone is designed, again, to take what used to be the SF40 and to fit it so we can take the SF40 and apply a new zone to it and make it consistent. So this wouldn't change, of course, this development at all. It would just be conforming and rezoned to a new development.
Is that the homes for rent development?
No, this is a older development. Again, we're only going to show you existing developments here. These aren't things that are proposed. These aren't things that, this is, the vast majority of what we're going to do is we're going to take this paradigm and then we're rezoning the entire city. And trying to do that, as we mentioned earlier, in a way that minimizes the potential for non-conformity. So this is one example of this zone. Now, I'm actually going to flip over here just a second to the handout we gave you so that we can walk through the table and gain feedback from you on that.
And then it's just the, okay.
Come on. Think about it.
I'm sorry, I forget, what are we doing?
We're looking at the handout that we sent out on Friday. Okay. Good, because I was kind of trying to keep track myself.
Yeah, there's a copy, yeah. I think you should, this.
Come on.
Yeah, I haven't seen. And then there was the crap over it. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Time is open, whatever. Yeah, that's just something. This castle, the property, city limits,
Yeah,
all the way.
yeah, pretty much, yeah, we're west of Castle, we're east of Castle, and we're under Bill.
So this is that's an internal castle, this is the building. This is all, there's farm,
Yeah,
that's Carmel, right?
It would be Lakes of Springfield would be just south of Castle and either side of Dexter.
Really? One of the persons. That's cool.
Also Hickox. North of Castle would be Carmel.
Sorry.
It's okay. Everything we do is with the weather, the storm, there's been a little uncertainty right now on the industry environment. Because everything in process is just moving. Because start to finish a project for us, we're going to do.
You got a picture?
Pictures.
Pictures. It's harder to tell. It's right now. Just because it's expensive. So the builders have seen us slow down. April, March and April in home sales. So we'll see kind of what their March numbers look like by
Another one it works.
May numbers look like.
That's not your side.
And we'll see what it makes things.
It's just traction.
It does, and it determines our perception on how.
So I apologize for that taking a little while. But here's the proposal. Again, this is the rural zone that would replace SF 40. It's, and as you know, Mr. Fallon was mentioning, the previous paradigm controlled by dimensional standards. This one controls by 2 per acre. So it doesn't matter what the lot size is, you can only have 2 houses on an acre limit. That's why we didn't include lot depth. We did include lot width, because that's to try and meet our street frontage to have some minimum consistency. But we left it smaller than the minimum lot width before, again, as we talked about, going with density standard to provide more design flexibility for the site to allow you to accomplish other objectives, like preserve trees, have a buffer area, etc. But from a density perspective, of course, the current SF 40 is 1 unit per acre. This would allow up to 2 units per acre. So it does have the ability, if you're redeveloping an area or developing an area that has multiple acres, to do up to 2 units per acre. Now on the setbacks, we talked about the reason for setbacks is, of course, your compatibility with adjacent uses. So there we did include some minimum setbacks. So the distance between houses in this area would be a minimum of 50 feet. This is, again, it's an agricultural, very low density. So even if you had 2 units per acre, it'd have to be at least 50 feet between each home. Well, that's sense of side yard, 40 feet between each home. Front, you guys had talked about wanting to make sure you had some consistent sort of setback on the front of the house, so that we did put in a minimum setback on the house at 25 feet. So that you certainly could go back further, but you couldn't get any closer to the street than 25, again, in this sort of rural area. Lot coverage is 45, it's just simply consistent with our current zoning out there. So you can't cover the entire lot with concrete. We do currently, in our definition of lot coverage, include impervious surfaces. We didn't put in here a building height or a dwelling unit size. You guys didn't express a lot of interest in deciding especially when you're having a half-acre lot, how big the house was, as long as it didn't impact those side front setbacks.
I'm wondering if we might be shooting ourselves in the foot, though, if we don't have a maximum building height, it's where we end up with a 170-foot spire built on a piece of property versus a maximum of 25 foot or something. Because I noticed the purpose statement is up for discussion as well.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, because I noticed their bed and breakfast, I'm a little bit hesitant about that. I think we need to define that so it doesn't fall into an Airbnb or short-term rental. I think that should be tightened up a little bit. And then the other one was aviation uses. Even if I have an acre lot, I'm not sure I want my neighbor to have a helipad next to me, along with this 120-foot control tower there. So I would want to try to
Just,
tighten those up.
just a question on the aviation use. I mean, generally, I mean, you've got these fly-in neighborhoods, right?
Pardon me?
Fly-in neighborhoods, you know, so does that allow, I don't think, I mean, put a runway on a 1 acre lot, but if you wanted to have a development that was a fly-in neighborhood with 1 acre lots and then probably have, you know, hangars, you know what these look like. Would we be precluding that if somebody wanted to do that, if we took out aviation use in it? I mean, that's the other side.
Well, I think we can also codify that or clarify it unless you think or something.
Okay. Okay.
I
I
just,
think that you can put it in your use table,
right.
but I'm not arguing against tightening this up if you want to do that. I think that the idea with this being an agricultural zone, which may not be appropriate for our community, but if it's being an agricultural zone, this could also be a 40-acre estate. It doesn't have to be 2 units per acre, that's the maximum.
Yeah.
It could be a much larger estate where you certainly could have
Yeah.
a runway, but that's certainly something you may want to tighten up through the use table or some other kind of condition.
Valid points. I have a question on minimum dwellings unit size. Generally, I think it should be a blank slate. Developers or people could do what they want to do. However, is there an unintended consequence of that? We have a finite amount of land that is a tax base for a city. So if we don't have a minimum size dwelling unit, which would be a certain number of tax dollars that come along with that, are we shooting ourselves in the foot long term by not having some kind of minimums there? Just from a long-term economic perspective?
It certainly provides more flexibility, which could allow somebody to put a small house on a large lot, certainly. But also under the zoning, again, you don't have to build 2 units.
No, I understand that, but are we shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't have a minimum?
Yeah, no, I'm not arguing against that point.
Or combined.
Yeah, or combined minimum. Yeah, that's a good point.
But you could really do a combined minimum, because again, each lot is going to be regulated separately.
No, combined minimum, 2 units per acre, so
Yeah.
combined.
So if you had like a 3,000 minimum, one could be 1,800 and one could be 1,200 or whatever.
Yeah, but it's going to be sold to 2 different people.
But if they're platted
Yeah,
separately,
Yeah, I
if
mean,
they're platted separately, you have 2 lots per acre, but one is owned by party A, one's owned by party B, they'd have to come in at the same time and apply to have a 1,200 square foot house and an 1,800 square foot house. So the density works per acre because it's when the developer's taking the whole parcel and dividing it out, but
Right.
the building piece is
From
more
a
complicated.
developer's perspective, is that minimum dwelling size, is it something that developers go, oh god, this is like stupid, or
It depends on what it is. There are some communities that have set them at 3,000 or 4,000 square feet, and that is difficult because not everybody wants a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot house. Really, the ceiling is what becomes more difficult when cities try and ban development and say you can't build a house in this zoning code that's more than 3,300 square feet. You have to move to the next zoning code to build a larger house than that.
And I'll just interject this. If you're gonna have 1 acre lots, you're looking at 1 or 2 houses per acre of 20,000 square foot lot. How many developers are really gonna come in and build on 1 acre? As far as just one house. The person's gonna buy the property in all probability and have a custom builder come in and build their house.
that's fair, yeah.
You know, you're not gonna have, I doubt Rustin's company's gonna wanna come in and build a house on just one house. In fact, y'all don't build, you have builders that do them.
Correct.
So a developer's not gonna do that. That's what you're looking at is an estate. And 1 acres, like you'll see on Pleasant Valley up in, or on, in Saxe, just crossing Saxe on Merritt. Those big old homes sitting over there.
Yeah.
So I think that we can, certainly look at, if there are uses here, we can define the uses, specific uses other than residential through the use table rather than putting it in the description. That might give us an opportunity to be more synergy through that process. You guys are very familiar with the use table. We haven't shown that to everybody, but I know that the planning commission is very used to the use table. We can only have that conversation. And if we have an aviation use, we can define where it can go and where it can't, and whether there are limitations regarding minimum size for an aviation use. That certainly makes sense. The question would be, again, is there anything in here that you think we've missed as far as wanting to increase setbacks? Or, like I said, if you want to have a minimum dwelling unit, understand that your lot size here, the way we have it set up right now, you get, 2 10,000 square foot lots. You can also have 2 8,000 square foot lots, as long as the rest of that acreage is in some sort of, public amenity use. You don't have to have it where that lot takes up the entire space. That's the flexibility that you provide. Or it could be 2.5 acre lots. That's the
So if somebody pushing to get a max building or a minimum building size?
I think that Councilman Reeves brought up the potential for their own building size.
Yeah, I'm not really for that. I mean, I can see, just like my situation where I have my wife, so it's 2 people, I want a 3,000 square foot home because I got a backheater, and she's out gardening. The reason why we want the 1 acre lot or the 1/2 acre lot, because she's doing her thing, and I don't need a big house,
So you want the acreage.
Right. So I'm thinking that the minimum building dwelling unit size is really, I kind of got pushed into that rock wall, but I wasn't sitting here then.
I guess unless you make it a fairly small, like a 2,000 square foot house, that's just almost for tax purposes, so, you get 2 tiny houses on an acre, we're not gonna do a whole lot out of that, but, so, I don't have a problem with minimum sizes, but I want a minimum size to be a pretty minimum size. And then maximum size, maybe, I don't know, maybe building height is a concern, but, I don't know that the actual square footage would be as well.
So in looking at this, just my feedback was what you described here, the minimum lot size is going to be 12,000 square feet. Even if you average them, because of your minimum side yard setbacks and your front and your rear yard setbacks. So that's just something to think about, is you're already limiting yourself to a minimum of a quarter unit an acre. And I'm presuming that the lot width is measured at the build-to line and not the street.
I'm sorry.
Well, a build line, is your 100-foot
So
lot width
for-
measured at your build line or is
So
it street
not
frontage?
for SF40. SF40 is at the street frontage, but for most others, it's measured at the line with a minimum 35-foot street frontage for most of the other zoning districts. So SF40 is a little different.
Yeah, this doesn't have a build-to line, so it would be at the street. At the street frontage. Okay, so there's a problem in your minimum lot width, is that if you have an atypical piece of land, you can't have a flag lot with this zoning category. So if you have a lot that only has 30 or 40 feet of street frontage, but opens up to a big green space in the back, and it's just a driveway that comes in and the house is set back 75 feet, it's non-conforming with this.
So for a lot of our other zoning districts, we just require a minimum of 35 feet at the right of way for access reasons, but then you can go up to a flag lot. So that is some language we can add to these charts as well to allow for flag lots.
Because I think what you're gonna see that most commonly in this and the next zoning type, then the next two, maybe the next three.
Yeah, I have a cul-de-sac.
Correct, where you have a cul-de-sac and a bulb, and so you only have 35 or 40 feet of frontage, but the lot is actually a half an acre as you go back, but it wouldn't conform with this. Everyone tracking what a flag lot is?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay,
Looks like flag.
you're absolutely correct. Okay.
Because that is Rowlett is away from, isn't it, is to have that flexibility so we can do that where we don't have to, again, take our rectangles and drop them on there.
Right, well, I think that, in order to allow flag lots in this area, if you had somebody coming and say, there's 2 points of regular, so you have, in order to go to a flag lot, you have to upzone it.
Makes sense.
So it wouldn't be something that would be allowed by right, it'd be something that you have to come back and get it to a higher density zone in order to allow that redevelopment.
That's with the minimum lot width.
Right.
Now, I'm still trying to understand actually your point on the minimum lot width, is this too restrictive or?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I think it's too restrictive. So the other math I did is that if you have a 100-foot wide lot with a 20-foot side yard on either side, you're left with a 60-foot building pad, which is a typical building pad. So a 60 by 70 building pad is going to give you your standard 2-story house with a 25-foot front yard and a 25-foot rear yard. So that's all I got to 12,000 square feet in the lot. 25, 70, 25, 20, 60, 20 for your 100-foot lot, so you're 12,000 square feet. But if you have a flag lot, you can't accommodate it with the minimum lot width. Unless there's some stipulation that you can measure that at the front of the house, or you can measure that at another location that's not measured at the street. So maybe there's a minimum street frontage, and then the lot width is either reduced or changed to be measured somewhere else.
Yeah, I think a minimum lot width at the public right of way is what you're looking for. Because again, how you can scope out the rest of the lot or even the building on that lot may be totally different around irregular geographical.
So is your point that that should be a bigger number or a small?
Smaller.
Or smaller? Smaller.
Actually, shouldn't all of them be smaller numbers? Minimum, side and rear.
That's just a question for the group, because if you look at the table that Christoph provided of your existing zones, the RDC had it at 10% of the lot width.
Right.
So you might be at 10 feet on either side, so you have flexibility. So I was just curious from staff's perspective, why did we set a minimum that's higher? If I remember that what I've actually read, it's 10 feet, if it's 10% if it's greater, is the current regulation.
Yeah.
So it actually, that 10% only makes it bigger rather than smaller. Got it. So it doesn't give you a reduction, it gives you a greater restriction if your lot is bigger. If your lot is now 300 feet, you have a 30-foot side. Exactly.
Remember, it's always
So-
7.5 or 10% of
Would
the
it-
lot.
Would it help just to cut it in half from the 140 to the 70?
From the 100 to the
So the
70?
140, the SF40, 140 to 70.
Oh, from what it is currently, 140 to 70?
Yeah.
That
Since
is,
you're going from 1 unit breaker to 2 units breaker.
that is probably closer. I would have to look and see what a flag lot is. I think typically they're 62 feet at the build line. But it may be, that would be close, would be closer.
Sometimes the concern is that we have pockets of the city, which is true for other cities, where there are lots that are behind a bunch of existing ones that have no access to street frontage. So that 35 feet allows them to get some kind of access easement to the right of way.
Yep.
So having some kind of language of the area of the lots that for access has to be minimum 35 feet and still have that lot width of 100 up there.
And that's minimal though.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not the everyday.
It is minimal, yeah, but it's
Yeah.
building some kind of flexibility in the language where we allow, like, it doesn't have to be the street frontage because those lots don't have access. We have lots like that right now. We're getting residents asking questions on how they build them.
But we can do that for the definition of a flag lot.
Yeah, and we could create that language.
Correct.
So, I'm gonna interject something here. The R1 district is, you've got it outlined here. We're talking about 1 to 2 units per acre. So, I'm kind of lost as how we get 12,000 square foot lots if 20,000 square feet is a half acre. You can't subdivide if it's only two units per acre max. You can't subdivide it into the 12 times.
No, he said 12,500 was the minimum lot size to meet the dimensional standards. If you meet the dimensional standards that we put in here, given the standard building size, you can't build a lot that's less than 12,500 square feet.
Right, and so, and I'm thinking of a specific,
You couldn't get to 2 units per acre, I guess is your point.
I'm thinking specifically of Dixon Road, north of Miller, south of the railroad tracks. Dr. Murray, I don't know if he still owns it or not, but that's one of the things we have in front of us. And although you have a relatively narrow, you go back and then it spreads out back behind some others. But in the acreage in there, I think there was like 15 acres. So you'd have a road that would be cut in and get your acreage to lay anything out for an R1 district. I can understand where he's coming from, but I was lost at the 12.5 because it's got to be a 20,000 square foot lot or bigger to be a half acre. Bigger than 20.
Well, again, this is not about lot size.
It's for the whole subdivision.
It's for the whole subdivision.
I understand that, but at the same time, you're either going to have one that's real tiny and one that's 3/4 an acre.
No, you may have, let's say you have a 40-acre site and you dedicate 20 acres in a park that's one lot. Now, when you do your average lot size table, you have one lot that's 20 acres. And that one lot is gonna drag up all the other lot sizes, even if they're half an acre. It's gonna drive them up to an acre or more because the average of
Okay,
20 half
yeah.
acres and 1 acre is much higher.
Right, you're right. Okay.
I'm still noodling over the height, building height, and having no restrictions on that. When you have recreational uses, my mind can't even imagine what that means and how high it could be. Some obscure person that we haven't met yet shows up and wants to build something up to, I don't know. But I think we should generally have a height restriction.
Ask me about that after the meeting. But I get you. When we were struggling with this one, again, we didn't have you to give us feedback. And what we were struggling with was, okay, going back to your question about value. I'm going through things in DeSoto. DeSoto has some big mansions. Some of those mansions are 3.5 to 4 stories tall.
Fine, but that is a restriction of it. But I
So we were trying to
recall an
figure out-
incident in Frisco where there was a Asian thing going to build something really big.
There's one in Fairview right now.
Yeah, Fairview's gonna.
And by federal law, we can't touch temples anyway. They can go anywhere they want.
It was a commercial use and it was crazy. It never got built. But I just generally think you should have something.
So do some,
Yeah, 45 feet.
45 feet? Going once, going twice.
So 45 feet is gonna be less than 3 stories in an attic, just for context.
Less than 3 in an attic?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you got
That's
12 apiece.
Big.
So by the time you have 9 or 10 foot plus space in between, you're at 12 feet per floor.
60.
So even if you did 48, or 50 feet, you'd be at 3 floors plus an attic, finished attic.
Fine. Somebody.
I don't think anybody's gonna build that high, but if you wanna hide it.
48.
Let me throw this in. We have a hospital here in town, Hogan States, which means you got doctors. And I'd like to lure a lot of doctors here. And I can tell you about family members. I have a niece, who just got rid of a 3-story house. Her husband's a cardiologist. Next door is a 3-story house by an orthopedic surgeon. And that whole neighborhood's huge. I'd like to have a doctor be able to live in town, want to build a mansion if he wants to. But that's in North Little Rock, folks, and that's not a wealthy area compared to, the Dallas area. So for whatever it's worth, that old neighborhood of 8 houses in there are all gigantic houses. One attorney and the rest are all doctors.
So, 52 feet?
Yeah, I'm fine. I think nothing's wrong. I think no restriction's wrong. Have the doctors water, build whatever they want to, 3 stories, perfect. Pay a lot of taxes, we're all happy. Go home.
52?
I think that's more than sufficient.
All right. Make a motion.
Make a motion to have the max building height set 52 feet.
That's second.
All in favor?
We'll go along with that.
Aye. Oh, we made a decision. Progress. Now, let's talk about unit size. That was the other thing that's been brought up a couple times.
2,000 square feet.
Make a motion.
I did, 2,000.
That's right.
All right, 2,000 square feet. All in favor? Good. Mrs. Holler, I'm doing your job for you.
Wait, I'm sorry, can we see again who actually voted in favor of that? Because it didn't seem unanimous.
I'm not gonna vote in favor of that.
Okay,
Okay, I wanna know why.
okay, so these are done.
I was going to come back to it later, but I'm just hesitant to set a minimum standard and then we start applying it to all of them. And we get back to a form-based code where there's a minimum size for all of these. Because once we go through this, are we just rubber stamping it and handing it off, or are we gonna read it one more time?
Oh, we're gonna go through this a couple of times. Again, we're building the skeleton here, as I sort of talked about. This is just the skeleton. Then we've got like the use table we gotta come back on. We've got, again, the development regulations we have to come back in. So there's not other things to put the meat on the bone here. This is just getting us dialed in, and that structure in place. Another issue that brought up was lot width. We have a consideration to change the lot width to make it small.
I think we could say 70 feet unless it's a flag lot, and in that case, 35 feet. It's that simple and then define flag lot.
We'll define flag lot separately.
Yeah.
So your next zoning category just to point out is 75 feet. So do you make it the same width? Or do you adjust the next one too? I'm just trying to ask a question. I don't mean to derail it.
No, it's.
Well, it would make sense, because if it was 140 and now it's 2, then it's 70, unless it's the flag lot, then we would have to adjust it.
Yep. I was gonna suggest you shift the next one down too, because at 4 units an acre, you can't get a 75
Makes sense,
lot
yeah.
there.
Mike, thank you for doing that, because we didn't do it once. Appreciate it.
I was going through old build plans, Christoph, and I'm trying to figure out what I built it. Why was it? I don't know what this is.
I appreciate you doing the homework. I do. All right, do we have a motion? On the lot width, minimum lot width.
Oh,
So,
I'll move to change the lot width to 70 feet unless it's a flag lot, and in that case, 35 feet.
Second.
Second by who? Sorry?
Second.
Reese.
All right, we got minutes happening. This is good work. All right, you want to call for the vote, sir?
All those in favor of 70 foot, is that correct, Kelly? Except the flag lot, which is 35.
Correct.
All right, that's unanimous.
Is this unanimous? Okay.
Can I throw a grenade?
Now.
Before we move on, so in going through this, I didn't see an accessory dwelling unit identified anywhere. Is that intentional, or are we coming back to it? Or are you
Coming
gonna
back
talk-
to it.
We are.
Coming
So then
back
I'll
to
talk about now.
We'll do ADUs and other uses there.
Okay, got it.
Before we start,
Don't get us
I'm
started.
gonna throw something else.
Okay.
Can we look at a potential estate, a state lot, and make it an SF40? If somebody wanted to go build a house like you got out on Merritt Road or whatever, they can go build one house on their 1 acre and have an estate.
R1.
Yeah, under this zone, they can build one house on 10 acres.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to just see some set aside just in case. Yeah, if somebody just wants to go do that and they don't get caught up in a developer going out actually and buying the 40 acres and turning around and developing it. But this guy's left out that, man, I'd like to come to Rowlett and just have an acre home.
Find an acre, buy it.
You can do, I guess you could do that.
That's
I don't
included.
understand the issue.
Many of them left.
I just hate to lose that opportunity.
We have a bunch of acre lots in the community already. All on sub 40 lots.
And they
Well,
were-
but this will
Continue to do what. Not anytime soon, sir. Not anytime soon.
I mean, 1 unit on that acre, that's right in that
Uh-huh.
0.52.
And that's the minimum, that's not the maximum.
Sure.
Or that's the maximum density, not the minimum.
All right, you may move on.
You ready to move on?
Okay.
I'm not sure I am.
Minor. Okay. All right. Over here real quick, I want to just get the benefit, and again, we already have a bunch of 1 acre lots in the community, and this is just one example of 1 acre lots. We have in the community, this would fit for, and then we also have on this next one, this is a subdivision right next to it that would
Yeah.
fit within this one.
Correct.
So again, we're stepping up in density. This one goes to 2.1 to 4 units per acre. And this existing development would fit within this classification. That's just down the street, it's actually right adjacent to this one. What this doesn't have is the benefit of some of the transitional standards, what we'll have to talk about some.
We're starting, is that 2 different zoning
Yes,
sizes? No, within the pink?
within this piece,
Yeah, like the upper right-hand corner, or upper portion, it looks like lots are smaller.
Top center kind
up here,
Yeah, yeah,
no, I think it's just, these have numbers over the top of them,
okay,
and these don't have numbers over the top.
okay.
They're actually, this is the unit number, and this is actually the roofs.
There, look at it on the.
And then one that's actually doesn't, you know, numbers on it? No, it still has the address.
It's like 2 different sizes.
So they're two different,
Yeah, it looks like it's 2 different sizes right now.
So
That's center.
that's,
street.
that's new neighborhood form based, so they're allowed different housing types.
Yeah, okay.
Well, and part of the reason, of course, we're doing this is to get rid of the form-based codes. This will allow us to make this one conforming under a,
Two different groups there.
yeah. But that's the flexibility. You're absolutely right, actually. These are more single-family, these are more townhomes.
Or 0 lot maybe?
There's zero lot stuff.
Yeah.
They're not townhomes because they are detached.
A 0 lot line.
So it would allow that to be a conforming use in this zone.
But that's. Big place, big open.
You.
That's interesting.
Now, I'm gonna check on this one, because this, again, we've got a 45% lot coverage. I think that one looks like it might be bigger than that. Yeah,
So the lot coverage, I don't think was complied. So this was this close. So just for context, SF20 and SF15, we have almost none of that in the city. And so this was about as close as we could get as far as density went.
But
It's not a perfect fit for the lot coverage.
but
What
for
is-
base code, you don't have lot.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't
We're
have lot
talking about
coverage.
the same road, what is Raven's Nest?
What? Sorry?
Raven's Nest,
Uh-huh.
what is it? I was thinking it's,
Yeah, I think what the zoning is.
I think it's,
That's a plan, but I think that's a plan.
yeah, I think it's, SF20. The Raven's Nest is also in Hickox.
So in order to make this one conforming, we might actually have to do a higher density zone.
Yeah. So yeah, this one, we it was hard to find with the max lot coverage for the 20 and
That's
15.
future.
We just don't have a ton of them in the city. But the density was matching.
Correction, everything I'm going for is that.
So some of the zones we may not, this one we may not use because it may not be a good analogy right now for this section.
Well, the analogy for that section right there is, like you said, 2.1 to 4 units per acre, and that's over the entire subdivision.
Subdivision.
So,
Yeah, but they're current, I think I mentioned this earlier, we have like 11 SF zones right now, and a lot of them aren't used.
right.
So this one was intended to capture a section of zones that really are almost not used currently in our current development. So this would be something that, there isn't anything out there in the built environment that fits this real closely, I guess is the point I'm making. So we don't have an example of a community that would fit comfortably within this zone. Doesn't mean that you don't want to use this at some point. If you want to take an area that's currently SF 40 and allow 4 units per acre, this zone would be available to you. You don't, you do that R1. We did put in a building height on this one. We suggested a building height on this one, of course, 3 stories is a little tight, as you mentioned earlier. But we did that because we're starting to get into a zone that's likely to be adjacent to another single-family zone, and height becomes a little more. Your setbacks are, your side yard is only 7.5 feet, so at that point, height becomes a little bit more critical in its compatibility with an adjacent use. So this one we did suggest a building height limitation that was a little shorter, so you didn't have the big mansion sitting next to the ranch.
So if I come in with a request to build a 3-story home with a 612-inch roof, and I'm at 37 feet, I can do it?
Nope,
You say, or
it does say it. What do you guys think?
I would allow it as the or.
Okay,
That's how I would interpret it, yeah.
then yes.
I'm just pointing out the difference between bullion output and
Appreciate your question.
Yeah.
Thank you, subject matter experts.
That's how I would talk about that.
So yes, 3-story with a very tall roof, you're golden. We didn't put in the unit size again. We did reduce the side setback, as I mentioned. We kept the front at 25, again, to be consistent. 40 to be consistent, and the rear at 25. 75 feet, and you mentioned earlier that we may need to reduce the lot width. So we want to talk about lot width first?
sure.
Did you do the math, 60, 35?
60 is probably where you need to be.
Yeah.
Is your minimum, in boring when you do the math, the minimum lot size that you could actually build would be 10,890, which is right at a quarter acre, which means that at 45% lot coverage, that you have 4,900 square feet of coverage, which delivers a 60 by 80 building pad. You need 80 feet if you're gonna have front entry. It needs to be deeper if we're gonna have alleys, but 80 by 60 and a 60-foot wide house, if you think you have a 2-car garage on the front, that's 24 feet, that gives you another, 40 feet, 35 feet of house. You have large porch, bay window, front stoop, entry area. So you have a decent width facade that's 80 feet deep. And then you still have a 25-foot rear yard minimum.
So your motion.
I like Kelly, that's
Oh, well,
Well, visually, the street before, where this neighborhood is it that much this is? Is that what I'm looking at?
No, that's too dense. It's too dense.
What's already built is too dense?
For this zone, yes. No, with that, yeah, it's too dense. That's a form-based code, development. It's just too dense for this. We have to use one of the more dense zoning classifications we don't have.
I'll move to change the lot width to 60 feet, unless it's a flag lot and then 35 feet.
I'll second the motion.
Sorry, who seconded?
Mr. Cook.
Okay, great.
Okay, anybody want to talk about that? What we're talking about is R2 and changing the minimum lot width to 60 feet from 75 and then a 35 foot if it's a flag lot. All those for that? Your hands? Okay, it's-
Yeah, that's-
Okay.
Any other areas of discussion for this one? We're going to be quiet for more. I'm sorry.
The lot size, 1,800. And on 60 feet, is that what?
On 80 by 60,
Or is it?
I would think so, if you're doing a single story.
We're talking minimum.
Minimum.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it can go up to 3 stories, so it can, yeah, so I would think the minimum.
Because if your lot coverage is 4,800 square feet, 1,800 gives you plenty of space to play with and to have a detached garage. Because the question is lot, well, this is the staff question, is lot coverage, if you have a detached garage, is that considered in your lot coverage or is it just the dwelling unit?
Part of your lot coverage.
Part of your
On the
lot
RDC.
coverage. Mhm.
Okay, so if you had a house that's 1,800 square feet and then you went and built a 2,000 square foot detached garage, you're bumping up against your maximum buildable area.
Not including paving.
Sorry?
Not including paving.
Including paving.
Oh, just
No, I'm
paving?
saying your paving goes towards your max lot coverage.
Oh, your paving goes toward.
Yeah, impervious
Driveway.
surface goes towards max
Oh
lot
gosh, so I gotta
coverage.
back up driveways?
On our,
No, so
on our
all you gotta
current
do is
code.
put a
Yeah.
Service, all you gotta do is put an impervious service.
Well, they're saying impervious
Yeah,
is
it's counted towards
counted
it.
in lot coverage.
So when we look at max lot coverage, your driveway's open.
Impervious services
Yeah.
are drive. So what I'm saying is if we wanted that big old garage in the back there, we'll put in crushed stone and a grid
Which we don't allow.
formation.
We now have a specification for
Driveways.
It's not crushed stone, it's pretty engineers.
Yeah.
And it's always behind the building.
Yeah,
And you're-
yeah,
we
so
just-
there's
it's
some,
concrete.
that's kind of a gross.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I think that's what you're gonna get. I was trying to pull up.
Well, so like, we're assuming that we're going to use our current standards.
Mhm.
We're going to have this discussion about exactly this.
Right, the lot coverage is available.
Yeah, lot coverage is available. If you want to, take pervious surfaces out of lot coverage and have it just be building lot coverage, you can make that recommendation. Right now, we're interpreting it the same way our code currently says.
Oh, okay.
Which is that any impervious surface is counted in lot coverage. So your pool is counted in lot coverage. But you can change that if you have a recommendation to do so.
Well, and I think that's a need to do change because as we move forward with potential for ADUs, and in-law homes, or whatever you want to call them, you're going to end up covering a lot more than 45%. So
Especially if you're counting a driveway.
Yeah.
But if you're just counting dwelling or vertical constructed space, I think you're okay.
I think the fear is we don't want people to go just concrete their entire yards,
Yeah.
so which I've seen in other cities. So
We actually had a variance come through recently where someone had done just that.
Yes.
yes.
Really?
Mhm.
They'd taken their entire, they built a couple of outlet wings in the back, and the entire, between their home and those outlet wings was all concrete.
Yeah.
And then,
And the head shape over.
yeah, and they basically, the hypothetical was that they were operating some sort of auto enhancement facility out of their house.
Well, you don't want that.
Matched autos or?
Well, I think going back, I think this is a legitimate thing. We'll take a couple of trailers. In a lot of your grand homes, at least, and even Texas first. It's called Texas First Texas. Where you have little yard, it's mainly all house. If you look at concrete for the driveway, it's way over 45%. Go.
And sidewalk.
Yeah, and a sidewalk, but that's a higher density use. This is really quarter acre to third of an acre. Yeah, this is still low density. I think what you're gonna get here are houses that have a detached garage. That's kind of the concept, right? Is you would have a house with a driveway that goes down the side and a garage or shop in the back. This is not a dense deal.
But didn't you say the code is 3.2 or something like that?
It is.
Units per acre?
But you couldn't build it in this because there's a variance of lot sizes and our minimum lot width wouldn't comply. Because our minimum lot width in Cottonwood is 30 feet. So they need to go down to like an R4 in order to build that range. So that's how you control the product type that goes into it too.
That max lot coverage is 60%.
Stick with the impervious surface, but increase it.
It's 60%.
That seems high enough. I think you can go with it.
I don't think what this is gonna allow you to do. If you got a home already on that property with a detached garage, you wanted to get an ADU for your parents. Was that, no, I don't want to drown. In that case, they gotta build the ADU in the pool.
In the pool, yeah.
But other pieces, just like the flag lot, we could have additional, specifications specifically for the ADUs. You know, where you can decide where ADUs can go and where the requirements can go with the ADU. Additional setback, height, other things that have to be specifically.
Could also include language that allows you to exceed the maximum, like lot coverage for an ADU. You can use that and include that in the use specifications. If you want to go that route.
Yeah, so the math, if you were to set a garage in the very back of a quarter acre or third acre lot, and you were to have a driveway that goes all the way back to it that's 20 feet wide, and you have an access to your house off of that, an adjacent garage going into your house, a 2,200 square foot first floor house, so you could go up to 4,000 square feet, and then a 300 foot paved pool entertaining area out back, you're at 57%.
I guess that, so 60 works well.
He's validating you. So you're close. I think somewhere between 55 and 60. Unless to your point, you're adding specific language that a detached garage or an ADU will allow you to increase your, what's it called?
Max lot.
Max lot coverage.
Just
So
depends
the
on.
question is, do you want to enable it by right and just say, if you have this zoning, you can cover 60% of your lot? Or do you want to say, with this zoning, you can cover 45% of your lot, but if you do a detached garage with a driveway or an ADU with a driveway, you can go up to
Or
this
perhaps
lot coverage.
50 and then the ADUs.
By right. Up to 60%. You're still gonna have to go, if you want to build an ADU on there, you're still gonna have to go ahead and put in a building permit and everybody verifies everything, but now you're not fighting that difference of, do I want a, 20 by 48 ADU or do I do 45, 45? I guess it's not coming.
I like the 61.
Yeah, the motion.
In which case, I'll make a motion. To change the max lot coverage to 60%.
I'll second
To change max lot coverage on an R2 from 45 to 60%. John put a motion and Mark with the second. I think, Preston said you could go probably up to 2,200, but that wasn't on the table, it just mentioned you could go bigger than 1,800, right?
Pardon me?
You
You just
could
talking
go-
about size of the house.
Oh, the max size I think was recommended was, or minimum size it was recommended was 1,800. But just for the math of getting to 57%, I utilized a 2,200 square foot home on the first floor. So 2,200 on the first floor, and then you could build another 2,000 on top, gets you to 4,000 square feet.
Now, if you keep it the direct second
Still comes,
So,
Which really ends up at a 3,600 square foot house because you have a 400 square foot garage. It's built into the house.
does anybody want to put a minimum building size?
I think we need to work on one at a time.
yeah, let's vote on the coverage and then we'll read on the motion.
So we vote now, right?
We vote.
Motion to vote, okay, for 45 to 60%.
Can y'all raise your hand high?
Yep.
Thank
Aye.
you. Get it, man. Get it.
All right,
Did we already change the lot list? I don't remember.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
we did.
the 60 and 35 were flagged.
All right, very good.
All right, minimum building size, unit size.
I'll move to change it to 1,800.
I'll say that.
What are we changing? 1,800.
1,800.
Adding a minimum of 1,800 square foot. All right, motion by Kelly, second John. All those in favor? Okay,
We have one opposed or an abstaining. We have to.
That's not why you're on this.
I think we're moving in the right direction. I just want to see where we land.
okay, so we ready to go to R3?
Minimum board size.
You don't actually have a lot of SF 9, 8, and 7. They almost don't exist anywhere.
Really?
Yep. Rep, mainly SF10.
We have some SF 10.
We actually made some SF10, mainly SF8s. We see a lot around here.
But no, it's a seven.
So I
No, it's
think
SF7. Let me
I
see.
think that's right, it's
Maybe
not.
it's zero foot now.
Maybe a few SF9s, yeah. A lot of SF10s, a lot of SF8s.
So after 8, you're saying it jumps down to SF6.
SF5, really.
Really?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. I don't even think we have SF6 in our RDC.
yeah,
Mm-mm.
it's not called.
Yeah, it does not exist in the Rowlett at all.
So you have 10, 9, 8, 7, 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, you know, some of them are not, a lot of it just ends up in PDs.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That stuff's expensive. And if what we're trying to do is, you know, hopefully maybe pull some PDs into this so we can reduce the number of PDs. But, alright, here's this one. Let's see, do we have an example that's a good example on this?
I think which one would differ this one? Hold up.
You know what,
The PD,
things work for me.
Oh, this one is a PD. No, wait.
I said, no, yeah,
Yeah, PD. SF9. That actually was pretty good.
with the big zone, no.
Yeah, with the base zoning of SF9.
Yeah.
But this is one we could potentially remove from a PD,
Oh, nice.
depending on how we do our development standards.
Yeah,
I remember this
This is an SF9
And base zoning in the PD is an SF9.
based
one.
on
And
this.
it's PD with that same line. Base
So we can make this conforming
with exceptions.
to current standards.
Is this 50-foot lots right here?
I think it might be 60 feet wide. I looked at a lot of developments today. Hold on, let me pull the plot.
Where is this from?
That's right across the street from the elementary school.
She's a,
Yeah, she's just 66.
Here's all this.
that's the Woodside Estates.
So they're 60-foot lots.
She's
So there's
And there-
60 by what's like,
113 depth.
for 113.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
On some, 113.
Some of them,
And they go up to 145.
yeah.
yeah. 113 down there divided one way.
That's all.
Right.
Because this one, because we're getting into a more dense environment, we included a build to zone, didn't you? Why did we try to do that? I hate this one. Maybe we'll have big buildings.
Well, now,
Is the existing coverage in this zone 45%?
No, I think we start getting higher in here. Let me go double check on the RDC.
Because I'm
Still 45? Oh, actually, it might be 45 for most of these. Hold on.
I'm looking at one in particular, it's at 7808, and they have a driveway, J-swing, and they have a pool and a cabana in the back, and they have a dog.
So,
A dog.
and I would have to look at the PD standard, so it could be that the PD standard allows for a higher lot coverage or allows
That is
for.
covered. That is not 45%.
Yeah, if you look at the lot code.
60%.
Well, if it's an old PD, if it's an old PD, it allows just for the building.
Not for.
Just for the building, not.
Yeah, this just happened within the 2006 code, that.
Did it change? Okay.
But if you're looking back at older PDs, you'll find that it's just buildings,
Got it.
yeah, which is
That
might
would
be
be
a
a
case.
legal non-conforming use.
Yeah, so you're at 45% until you get to SF5, and it jumps up to 75% for max lot coverage.
Okay. But we may want to consider that being differently. In order to bring in something like this, we need to increase that density significantly. Or not density, that lot coverage.
Yes, it's 5% on this one.
I'm gonna pick on Preston again. With the purpose statement in this, basically you're looking at cottonwood trees. In my opinion.
You're closer.
Closer, because we're talking now about clustered around common open spaces and buffers and by the time you get to the units per acre, it's almost like what I was stating with.
It's closer, but the difference here is out of Cottonwood, all the lots are deeper. They're at least 120 feet. And so you have a larger lot that's narrower for some of the detached houses, but 50 feet for the detached ones. That's correct. So in this one, we have both a width and a depth as a standard. It's the first time we've actually had the depth popping up. So that's a 50 by 75, landing lot size.
Yeah.
Still fairly flexible.
45. Oh, no, 45. Yeah.
I personally think the units per acre at 4.1 to 6 is a little high. You're starting to get into some very dense. When you're talking about the number of houses, and now we're starting to see single-family homes is way closer to that.
It just has a 5-foot setback, so 10 feet between each home is the minimum. So this is certainly more dense. The question is, you don't have to use a zone. If you think it's too dense, don't apply it.
When you're done with your math.
There's certainly some areas where we have existing homes where this would make them conform. If you don't go any more dense, we have to make those areas non-conforming.
Did you read, I'm sorry, I got a little lost there.
So he was arguing that we shouldn't have something that's this dense. If I'm misstating that, please correct me.
I just remember.
If he said you shouldn't have something this dense, and my point back to him was that we already do
Yeah.
have things that are this dense.
Don't you have that?
So we would have applied that if we didn't make something this dense available, we couldn't make those neighborhoods conform. They'd be legal non-conforming. So we have to have this option available in order to take those zones that already exist and have already been applied to some property and make them continue to be a conforming use. Now, you don't have to apply this to a neighborhood that is less dense. you apply it to where it fits.
What do you think about the density and the height? Like a 3-story, it kind of rubs me the wrong way that it's just a very small lot and there's 3-story and I've got a 1-story and they're towering over me. I don't know, it's kind of rubs me the wrong way. Why do we have do we have that condition? Do we have a 3-story in this size lot?
Let's take a look. In our current zone,
Yes.
yes, this is our
Or
current
2.5
standard,
and 35 feet.
35 and 3-story.
Okay.
This is all of our current zones in this category.
Can I ask a question to some of you experienced people, but I'm just trying to put things as buckets for me. So this right here seems to me to be sort of the sweet spot of what our future development is going to be. I mean, if we're, the first two are much less dense, much denser, but this is sort of what this is going to be the framework, the bulk of our new development. We should design this for that. Would you agree that that's probably true?
It's in the area of medium, and to call this low to medium, I can think it's a little more medium, just not like low to medium, it's a little more medium density. For medium density development, it's still single family. This is kind of, you go any denser than this, you're moving away from single family.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point, is that if you're sort of finding that median neighborhood that I think is kind of what we're looking for.
Is this where Cottonwood?
Trail to Cottonwood, yeah, good example. I guess what I'm trying to say is, as we're putting these together, this seems to be maybe, I don't say they're all important, but this may have a wider range across, more impact across
More
the
appealing
city.
to the developer.
Yeah, more appealing to the developer. So I guess my point is just to kind of want to make sure this one, really thought through this one because it does sort of seem to fit that.
Assuming we didn't talk through the public.
No, I'm not, but we did have a parameter that we were looking at when we were talking at it. And I think this was kind of, maybe sort of should, maybe that makes sense.
I think to your point, we're only talking about 435 acres
Right.
yet to be developed. So what percentage of that is R1, 2, 3, that's a discussion we're putting down the
There could
road.
be redevelopment.
But that's your point, though, that's.
There's also redevelopment, Mark, so you gotta think about that too. Like, it's not just a finite number of, we're only gonna develop 435. There could be some redevelopment going on.
Sure.
I think what's important is to me, this is part
I'm gonna get north of
And you do it, that's what allows such a jump.
So,
A little bit.
while they're discussing that,
You're correct.
what's the potential population out of going 6 units per acre?
Depends on where you look.
Well, that's the average also.
And you have 435 acres, right? You're only talking about 6,000 for that. Total.
If you put this over all the current lots that we have.
2.3 people per house.
I feel pretty good about it, but,
So I think you're right, that this is the sweet spot in development right now. It's a 50-foot wide lot, 50 to 60-foot wide lot. The house pad that you're gonna build on that the market wants currently is 75 feet deep. So I'm not worried about the minimum lot depth, because the pad is gonna dictate at least that. If you're gonna have front entry, a 25-foot minimum front setback works, because you pull your car all the way off the street into the garage, you have spaces to park. So your total depth of 120 feet times 50 feet wide, you're at 6,000 square foot lot minimum, right? And of that, if you applied a 60% lot coverage, you would have 3,600 square feet, which would allow you to have a 400 square foot garage.
yeah.
And then still 3,000 square feet of coverage on the first floor. So you could have a 2,600 square foot house and then a pool area. And then you can build on top of it. And that's about what they're building in Cotton Creek, is 2,600 on the first floor and then 1,800 upstairs.
And
What's the average appraised value of that?
Oh gosh.
What you just described? 300, 400?
It's probably, depending on the subdivision, probably closer to 550 to 6.
That's the number you need. So there's no objection when you're getting those kinds of returns of your development.
And when we were looking at the numbers, we were talking about, we were doing the math already, and it would be the minimum dwelling unit would be 1,600. With this increase the lot coverage to 60% to make it.
So it's the depth that's off on this one?
No, it works.
No, it
Okay,
works.
this one you guys got spot on.
Yeah.
We're just gonna change the lot coverage.
Yeah.
Then you change the lot coverage, and then we just put in the minimum dwelling size.
And they
No,
can
they-
be highlighted. Figure it out.
You should have precedence.
So what I think is important about this one to keep in though is attached dwelling structures, because, and that's in the description up top, because when we drove through Wiley in that northern corridor, there are those joint homes, they call them the new term for duplexes, twin homes or paired homes, where it's truly two units that are attached on a 50-foot lot. And each one of them has a single car garage and they're 25 feet wide. But they're kind of a common firewall and they're on a single lot. But that will allow you to build that in the same area, so you have a mix of housing types.
You don't need to adjust this.
Yeah.
Because right now we've got no side setback of 5 feet. So if we want to have a zero lot line, we can.
No, that's okay, you just force them to increase the lot size.
Yeah, but you can't have a 5-foot setback on a house that has
Zero lot,
on a duplex.
right? A duplex? You got to
Oh, your minimum side yard? Well, what if it's adjoined? That's not, it's,
That's what I'm saying.
because it would be on one platted lot, it's not on two lots.
Oh, and they're in one lot.
It's two dwelling units on one lot.
Oh, okay, okay.
How's it platted that way?
It's a single plat
Single
and a
ownership.
single ownership.
Yeah.
Okay, it just has 2 units.
Oh, okay. Well, then we don't need zero lot line.
Right.
It's not like.
I mean, you still do duplex.
It's a mother-in-law suite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So lot coverage is the only one we want to sort of, like increase this up to 65?
I'll move to increase the lot coverage to 60% and increase the dwelling size, or the minimum dwelling unit size to 60.
What is
The minimum dwelling,
I'm sorry.
60.
60?
Do you not want to go to single lot on a lot coverage?
We worked it out to 60. And it worked. 60 is what we did before.
Ideal in the background, or you're going to small lots.
I'm sorry?
With your 60% coverage, what did you take into consideration?
A 40-foot by 75-foot house pad. That includes a patio, and then that includes an additional 600 square feet of paving for your driveway or your backyard space. Is that too tight? Because
I think we need to do 65 with these.
your driveway is gonna be 400 square feet, 20 by 20.
There's no harm in increasing the max lot coverage, so is there? I mean, I'm kind of, we're on track, but I just think, why not?
I'm just thinking if somebody wants to put a pool
Because
in
the
that.
thing is outdoor living is much more popular now than it was 20 years ago. It's going to only continue to be more so. So I figure, why not just give them flexibility? Yeah.
If you went to 65, you'd have 500 square feet you could play with in the back. So you have
How much more square feet?
500
500 square feet.
more square feet to play with in the backyard.
Yeah. Makes sense to me.
At 65?
At 65% coverage.
70 feet, what did this one say, 70?
He would say that.
Yeah.
I think 65 is comfortable as long as there's a mechanism that staff has to come back and increase that with a specific permit. You know, if you want to add additional outdoor living space, if you want to add a pool that increases beyond 65%.
Yeah, there are ways you can add that to use specific languages for accessory structures if you wanted.
There's always the lowest important adjustment.
And
The goal would be to create a mechanism that staff could utilize though, so you don't have to go to board adjustment or someone, so that staff could have an allowance up to 70%, an extra 5%.
well, in something like that, Board of Adjustment can't even really, they're not supposed to hear because that's not a hardship. So the way you would have to do that would go to a PD. So if you build flexibility in, then we can avoid those PDs, so.
But that can come back if you stay.
That's,
And,
when we get to that
Sorry.
piece, so I can amend to 65% and 60%.
I'll second that.
I'll vote for it.
Okay, I'll-
Oh, sorry, we get ahead of the chair.
65% was the
65.
Okay, a motion by Kelly and a second by John to, on R3, to change the maximum lot coverage from 45 to 65%, and the minimum building to go to 1,600 square foot.
Question, can we restrict that so it's non-commercial use?
Oh, absolutely, so our residential.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
All those in favor?
Unanimous.
All those opposed? Those
Opposed or opposed?
Whatever, but
Then I saw it over it.
Yeah, Kelly, in checking the math too, you're gonna be fine because you could really, based on those dimensions, get 7 units to the acre, but we're capping it at 6. So you're essentially putting an extra 250 square feet in every lot in order to spread it out.
Okay, I'm gonna do time check, we've got about 8 minutes before we let everybody go tonight. So,
I need to go back a couple minutes early.
we've got about 3 minutes before,
Well, 3 minutes?
whenever you like, I understand you get out the application.
okay,
This is, R4 is the next one. Before we dig into this one, it starts to get complex. So let me ask you a different question. One of the first questions I asked you last time was, how many residential zones do you want? We had 5 on the table, I brought you 7. Okay? Do you think that that's kind of the reasonable number? Have we sort of covered, again? I've got a, yeah, okay, I've got a yes over here, okay, good. No,
I
that's-
like that from staff. What does staff say?
That's the 7 we brought you, that's the 7 we brought you. Yeah. I think that we can cover what we have in a built environment and create at least one opportunity for something we don't have anywhere, and that is the residential high rise. We don't have that anywhere right now. And I'd say there's probably very limited place where we want that use. Probably only Sapphire Bay.
But
But I wanted to have it on the table in case at some point you do want to apply it to something like a Sapphire Bay. But other than that,
don't we already have that by contract?
we have a development agreement with the current Sapphire Bay, which has a number of pieces to it. I don't know whether.
There was 2 towers, 28-story towers,
Yeah, I'll go back and look.
at least in the original.
I can guarantee you that the development on Sapphire Bay is going to change. What it's going to change to, I cannot, I think, look, I can guarantee you it's going to change.
Well,
I do
that was
want
revealing.
to mention.
We've added this whole value tonight.
What's the next
Also,
question?
well, let's be truthful. It's changed from day one. It hasn't changed.
Before they wanted to.
That's why you may want to ask the zoning exec, they control what happens.
I do want to mention this, before we dismiss and adjourn for the evening. There are 2 items for us in planning and zoning. I would urge you to stay and see those 2 items. They're townhomes. And they go to what we haven't gotten to tonight on this, and that's the R4, 5s, and so forth. And you're going to see that one request is right here, right across the street from City Hall. And you've got 6 units, and there's nowhere to park.
All we're doing is that's a platform.
I understand,
So you have, I mean, if it technically fits the requirement, it's a yes.
I understand, but the point is that that's gonna be what 6 units on a quarter of an acre look like, and there ain't no parking except on the street.
No, they have garages.
Huh?
First floor is a garage.
Outside of the people that live there for any visitors or anything.
Right.
There's no other parking.
Same way with my house.
Yeah. Well, their driveways aren't long either. So, and another one is 35 units down on just the west side of Dow Rock off of Miller. And that translates into 24 units per acre. So that's what that'll look like. Anyway, that's for whether which one.
But that's actually, thank you. That's one of the reasons that we put together this zone here, which was downtown. Because
You cover that?
to basically, yeah, to make it consistent with what we're actually happening on this street. And so we can make that conforming. And if you desire to zone this lot the same as a residential downtown mixed use, so that you could, you know, assuming we ever move out of this building, which I'm not guaranteed, this could potentially redevelop into something that is consistent with the other developments actually occurring farther down the street.
And it's not open up a can of worms. Austin,
Too
for
late.
instance, did not have any requirements for parking to this day. So because they wanted a walkable downtown. So most commercial buildings have 3 per 1,000, 4 per 1,000 car parks as a requirement. So I don't know if that's something we should consider when we talk about commercial development, is putting in something about parking, because obviously Austin was very short-sighted in their planning development, and we're all paying for it.
Well, yeah, and so we have some very strict parking requirements, which we have actually been wanting to back off on. And we found that really developers, people, commercial entities know how much parking they need, and they build it. So,
That's a development standard question that we will definitely address
Yeah,
on the residential and commercial side.
yeah, okay, good.
All right, you're,
All right.
you're very much.
We are adjourned.